Hello and welcome. In today's video, we're going to be discussing what my Animal Crossing New Horizons villagers would read and what would be their favorite book. So I had this idea a little while back of trying to figure out what my villagers' favorite books would be. Because if you look on their wiki or you just talk to them, you find out a lot of different things about them, like some of their likes, some of their dislikes. I think like their future career or hobbies and things like that, especially if you go on the wikis, you can know a lot about them. And as a reader, I have my favorite books. Obviously, my Animal Crossing villagers read too, but their wiki doesn't say what favorite book they are, so I'm doing this to kind of help them out. Now, in this one, I'm only sticking to the villagers that have been on my island, my kingdom island specifically. So if you watch my part 1 of tier ranking my villagers, those are the villagers we're going to be giving books to, essentially. But as I was doing this, I kept wanting to do tons of others. I had so many other villagers with their favorite books just running through my head. So if you really enjoy this, I may do a second one with villagers that I've had on my other island, but also villagers that I've never had at all. So book-wise, I tried to stick with books that I've read, just because that way I can understand what the book's about, as well as I understand who the villager is and their personality and kind of the vibe they give off. So there are a few that just kind of have don't have a specific book. They just kind of have a cluster of books that they would enjoy. For most of them, they have a very specific book. I feel like the easiest way to do this is alphabetical order, and let's go ahead and get into what my villagers' favorite books are. So we are starting with, if we're starting alphabetically, we're starting with Agnes, and she was one of my starters on Kingdom all the way back March 20th, 2020. She gives me mystery vibes, she wants to figure out all the gossip around town. She's the one poking her nose and everything, figuring out all these little dirty little secrets, uncovering stuff, connecting dots. She's just very in the know about things that maybe other people don't realize she's in the know on. And for that, she loves a good classic mystery. Agatha Christie is her queen. So while she's definitely reading all the mystery books, all the old-timey mystery books and things like that, her favorite one is probably Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. Next up, we have Allie. She comes across as materialistic. Not in a bad way, but just look at her appearance, very much trying to be fashion forward, trend setting. She's also in on the gossip. I feel like she would be basically, everyone thinks that she likes them, but she's kind of talking smack behind people's backs and things like that. And for that, she gets Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I feel like she would eat that book up with all the just gossip and internal drama, as well as how much everything is and just the opulence of it all. She would also be very upset that there hasn't been a second movie coming out, which honestly, I'm right there with you, Allie. I want that second movie. I loved this book series and I loved the first movie. I need more. The next villager is Apollo. He gives me off every time I see him, I just think America. Maybe it's because he's a typical looking a bald eagle type bird, but he just spews off America, and I feel like he would love historical fictions, especially books around World War I and World War II. You know, he's one of those 40, 50-year-old men that are obsessed with World War I and World War II. Maybe a little too much, and it's a little weird, but his favorite book is still very shocking, you know? You may not agree with me, but I feel like he has his favorite book, he doesn't let anyone know. He has a book that he tells people is his favorite book, but his real favorite book is Lovely War by Julie Berry. He is a sucker for romance, but he feels like he can't let that show. He can't let that side of him out because it's not masculine enough or whatever. He has some internal stuff to get over. But yeah, he read Lovely War. He went into it for the war and left with the love of the romance. And yeah, I just feel like that's best of both worlds for him. Next up, we have Bam. Bam, he likes adventure. I think he's a sporty villager or a jock, but I can't remember. But he is definitely active. He likes doing stuff. And he's also someone that I feel like would know like a lot of random facts about a very niche topic that no one else really cares about. And so when he read Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, it quickly became his favorite book. One, because of all the action adventure. And two, with how much niche knowledge there is. Like, even if his niche knowledge is not the 80s, he felt that kinship with the book of like just being obsessed and knowing all these random facts about a specific thing, and he felt that passion and stuff like that to where he immediately connected with the book and loved soaking up all the little tidbits of the 80s. Next up is Becky, and if you watched those other videos, you know me and Becky have some beef. I tried to not let that sway me in what book I was going to be picking for them. Honestly, because they deserve to have a good favorite book too. But Becky just screams that like if she was a human, she would be the main character in Confessions of a Shopaholic. I think it's by Sophie Kinsella, but I honestly didn't look it up, so I may be wrong. But yeah, she's definitely, and because she's the main character of Confessions of a Shopaholic, like, she immediately clung to that book. And she's surprised because, you know, she doesn't really read. She's not much of a reader. So she probably picked this up as like a beach read for her to like read on vacation, just on the beach. Next up is Xiao, and there's not much going on in the head, it feels like, for him. And because of that, I feel like he probably watched the show first, and then he enjoyed the show so much that he was like, you know what? I think I may give this reading thing a shot. And he read Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman and loved the book just as much as the TV show. Next up is Chrissy, and she's a cozy fantasy girly, you know? She loves to snuggle up with a book, and she has like her stack of fantasy like beside her nightstand and things like that, and she just kind of like, her favorite thing is to read when it's storming outside. But big books, they intimidate her. No. She has some of them in her stack, but they're at the bottom, you know? She keeps meaning to read them, but the size intimidates her. Like Priory of the Orange Tree, she has it probably there, but she's like, ugh, I don't know if I'm ever gonna actually read it. And because of that, the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire is her bread and butter. She loves that series so much. She always feels so accomplished when she reads it because, you know, she can read through them so fast. And also, the series hasn't ended. So she also loves that as well. Next up is Coach. And while he is a jock, I didn't want to do like typical, oh, you're a jock, you're a lazy, you're a cranky, so like this is what you get. Like for jock, oh, you read memoirs or like sports books and things like that. No, that's boring. Also, Coach is very much a himbo. He doesn't have a lot going on up there in the brain, so a lot of words would turn him off. And also, the book needs to be fast-paced. It needs to be rolling and going for him to keep his attention on it, because honestly, why would you be reading when you could be out tossing the football? He probably buddy read this with someone like thought that he would enjoy this, and so they wanted to like kind of be sure he read it, so they buddy read it with him. And that is Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero. And just the Scooby-Doo gang aspect and the like mystery and the little bit of horror and stuff, like just was like just enough to keep his attention and be like, ooh, what's happening next? What's happening next? So he loved that book. And whatever villager got him to read Meddling Kids, he's bugging him about like finding another book like that so he can read, because he's not gonna go out and look, because he doesn't know how to do that. He probably went to the library one time and just walked down a random aisle, picked up a book, and like started to read it to see what it's about and got bored. Like he couldn't even get through the synopsis, so he put it back and is like, you gotta help me pick out books like that one. That one was so good. Next up is Cube, and he doesn't have a specific book, but that's because he's reading all the time. And he's reading all the manga. Like, he loves Black Butler, Attack on Titan, Death Note. He probably reads some Naruto and One Punch Man, you know, all those like typical classic mangas that you see. He doesn't care for shoujo. I don't know what the other one is, but I just know shoujo is like the girly one, the slice of life, you know. He doesn't do that, even though he should, because they're great. He does the other ones, like Promised Neverland and things like that, and he just has a whole manga selection. Next up is Diana, and I also have a little bit of beef with her. Not as much beef as Becky, but definitely some beef. Again, I try not to let that sway me, but also she gets just a collection of books too, and it's a collection I've never read and I never intend on reading. And no hate to anyone that does read these books, but it's just, these are not, I don't have any interest in these. But Diana does, and that's any and all Colleen Hoover books. She's on the book talk where they talk about Colleen Hoover all the time. She decided one day, she stumbled upon book talk, saw them talking about Colleen Hoover, decided to pick them up, and fell in love and started reading all the Colleen Hoover. And because I've never read Colleen Hoover, I don't know which one's her favorite. I don't know. It could be any of them. Next up is Ed, and he wasn't on my island for long, but he just screams indie coffee shop vibes to me. And because of that, you know his favorite book is Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and I'm gonna butcher the last name. I forgot to look it up before doing this video, so I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it because I don't want to be disrespectful and butcher it. I meant to look it up beforehand, but you know, I then forgot. So sorry, but Before the Coffee Gets Cold, he loved that book, ate it up, and yeah, he never thought he would be really into like fantasy or magical realism or anything like that. He thought he was very much, it needs to be set in the real world for me to enjoy it, blah blah blah. But this one, he didn't realize it had that little magical realism element, and it surprised him. And so now he's like diving more into magical realism and stuff like that. And it's just his book horizon is broadening. Next up is Eloise, and she's a classic lit girly, you know? She has all the classics and she has them in like all the matching sets and stuff like that. And her favorite book is Emma by Jane Austen. She sees some of herself in Emma, she sees some of herself in some of the other characters, and she longs for a romance like Emma's and Knightley's. Next up is Eunice. Eunice also wasn't on my island for long, but looking at her, like, I can't really explain how I got these vibes of like any of these books, but just like looking at them, I'm like, oh, this is your favorite book. And I can't really explain it in a way that's like super articulate, but looking at her, it's just like, oh, you're a high fantasy person. You love big books in big series that go super in depth with world building. If I tried to read those same books, I would be so confused. I would not have fun. But Eunice loves it, you know. Give her anything and everything about the world. Give her all the little tidbits. She'll eat them all up. Next up we have Fang, and he, just like Ed, has a translated book as his favorite book. And that is A Luminous Republic by Andreas Barba. And honestly, this book reminded him of home. Again, don't tell me why I think these things. It's canon in my world, okay? It reminded him of home, the cover did, and like the setting of the story and things like that. And so, which honestly, can't be mad at him for, because that book is really good and definitely recommend it, especially if you like Lord of the Flies retellings, because it's a Lord of the Flies retelling, but it's from like the parents' POV and like an outside POV of like these wild feral children and stuff like that. Next up we have Leopold, my little scientist professor. He loves a good sci-fi that is based in reality. He doesn't care for the space sci-fis. He doesn't care for like Star Wars or Star Trek or anything like essentially fantasy sci-fi. He wants sci-fi that is very much based in reality. He wants the facts, he wants the plausible, but it's stretched just a little bit, you know? And because of that, the first books that came to my mind were Michael Crichton. But his favorite book is Micro by Michael Crichton, because it's kind of like a realistic Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. That was probably one of his favorite movies growing up, that and like Flubber and things like that, that kind of got him into his love of like knowledge, teaching and things like that. So yeah, Micro by Michael Crichton is his favorite. Next up is Lyman, and Lyman is my favorite villager of all time. I love him so much, and he was also my starter on Kingdom, my other starter along with Agnes. And honestly, it was really hard not to just give him Solace, this book right here, because this book is my favorite book and my favorite series of all time. So it was really hard to kind of be like, okay, just because he's my favorite doesn't mean I can just pair him with my other favorite and like it makes sense, because honestly this doesn't make sense. He would not. He would try to read it for me and he'd probably like enjoy it, but it's not his cup of tea. What is his cup of tea is Tristan Strong Punches the Hole in the Sky by Kimwe Mabali. It's middle grade, so it's easy for him to digest. He can get through it with a lot of ease, and it's also like super exciting. Like the main character is a boxer and he's super sporty because he's always talking about abs and stuff like that, you know? This book has a little bit of everything tied into one. Next up is Melba, and she loves The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. Those little graphic novels are her bread and butter. She loves them. She sometimes won't even read them. She'll just look at the photos and look at how pretty they are. And maybe this book even inspires her to try drawing a little bit. And she gets lost in these like fantasy worlds in her mind of like what her dragon would look like and like what she would be in the Tea Dragon Society and stuff like that. So this book definitely like sparks imagination and sparks creativity for her, and just whenever she needs to be recharged, she can easily dive into this series and soak it all up again. Now, Mary, she is self-conscious, you know, but she doesn't want to be self-conscious. And because of that, she likes to read a lot of nonfiction to kind of help her come into her power, come into her own, and embrace and love herself and stuff like that. And so she loves reading a bunch of feminist nonfiction, kind of like Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay, How to Be a Feminist by I want to say Chidiana Gagne, but that's from The Good Place. It's not the author's name. The author's name just left me. But like, she loves reading those. But yeah, she just wants to be in her own and not be so self-conscious and just find her inner confidence and bloom like the beautiful flower she is. Next, we have Olaf. I don't spend much time with him. And he looks like Michael Jackson. So I tried to not just give him a Michael Jackson book. But once I thought that, I couldn't really get it out of my head. So he gets celebrity memoirs. This one probably is the most like unrealistic one that out of all my villagers, but you know, the seed was planted and it blossomed real quickly. Yeah, nothing else to really say about that. On to the next one, which is Pecan. They're just like Chrissy, you know? They love to snuggle up with some hot cocoa, a blanket, and just read away. And they are also intimidated by big books. But they're not necessarily fantasy cozy. They're sci-fi. Which I don't know if these books are actually that cozy, but you know, she likes to be cozy while she reads her sci-fi. And she, unlike Leopold, likes I guess it's technically fantasy sci-fi. You know, like off in other worlds, in space, stuff like that. And so she loves the Binti series by Nnedi Okorafor. She was blown away and she instantly read it again, you know? And she's probably also read like Escaping Exodus, and I love how I keep trying to give other examples of books and then I just get one and then my mind goes blank. But yeah, they are definitely just like Chrissy, just with the sci-fi twist, you know? Next up is Pietro, and his is a comedy. He loves to laugh. Obviously, he's in clown makeup. He loves to have fun, but he also kind of loves freaking people out a little bit, you know? He likes the horror. He likes that people are scared of him sometimes. He thinks it's hilarious, especially because when people actually get to know him, they're like, oh wow, you weren't scary at all. And because of that, he loves a good comedy horror. And his favorite one is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. He had been enjoying like your typical horror books, but then when he stumbled upon comedy horror, he strictly went there and was like, best of both worlds, you know? Next up is Skye, and this one I can't really explain, but you know, they like the thriller, they like the adventure, and they love a good isolated trope, like isolated, can't get out, no one can come in. They love that. They eat that up. And They recently read Devolution by Max Brooks, and they can't get it out of their heads, you know? They are just like constantly thinking about that book, which honestly, I don't think about it as much anymore, but after I read it, like the first time and the second time, I was constantly thinking about this book too. So I get it, especially with the Bigfoot involvement. It was something that she didn't know that she wanted, but she did, and she got it. So, and last but not least, we're finally at the final villager of this thing. I'm sure this video is probably very long, but I kind of have to explain my answers, don't I? But it's Zucker. And Zucker, he loves a good YA contemporary romance, you know? I don't know why, but again, just looking at his face, I immediately thought YA romance. And looking through the books that I've read, the one that immediately jumped out and was like, yes, Zucker would eat this up, is Of Curses and Kisses by Sandia Menon, which is a contemporary Beauty and the Beast-esque retelling. Zucker is all over that. He loves happy endings, and he loves getting emotional at the end and being like, I'm just so happy for you. And even though he's not a teenager anymore, he just loves that young love, you know? So those are all my villagers. Those are all my villagers. I know it was a lot, but if you're still here, thank you so much for sticking around. Please let me know what your villagers' favorite books are, or if you want me to do a part 2, what villagers I should specifically do. I'd love to discuss all these books in the comments, and maybe one of these villagers has your favorite book, and if so, let me know. That would be great. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!